As many of you know, one of our beloved founders, Andrea Nevins, died the morning of the first Seder last month, and she died surrounded by love. Andrea literally taught us what love looked like when she helped establish our Chesed network at IKAR, which has, over the course of the last 2 decades, supported literally thousands of people, including many people in this room, through some of the most difficult and most wondrous moments in our lives. In the final year of Andrea's life, she said that there was one teaching that she kept circling back to that gave her strength and clarity. Between stimulus and response, it is said, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose. And in that choice lies our freedom and our growth. This quote is often attributed to Viktor Frankl, the psychologist and philosopher, survivor of Auschwitz, and it is obvious why. It so brilliantly captures the very essence of man's search for meaning, in which Frankl argues that everything can be taken from a person, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. For Andrea, this idea was a lifeline. It awakened her to a world of choices that she could still make, even as the cancer crept through her body. She could still choose faith and connection and gratitude, and she did until the very end. It is Parashat Tazria-Metzora this week. As you have heard, this is a Torah portion that I will forever associate with the founding of IKAR. That very first Shabbat when I stood before 135 people who packed into a tiny actor's studio 21 years ago, and I tried to offer a read on this Torah portion of skin lesions and erupting afflictions that would inspire us to take a risk together, to envision a different kind of Jewish community and a different kind of Jewish future together. To my astonishment, the Torah provided and continues to provide the inspiration we need, though often, as Frankie and generations of B'nai Mitzvah students with this parasha have had to discover, not in easy or obvious ways. So I want to ask you to consider just one dimension of the truth that comes from these pages. The lead actor in this play is the Kohen, the priest, who appears dozens of times as the Torah articulates the proper protocol when one discovers an affliction that must be investigated to determine its seriousness. Is it just a surface rash requiring some eczema cream and a Benadryl, or is the affliction amok me'od b'saro, deeper than skin, an indicator of tzara'at, rendering a person tameh, impure, or tahor, pure? Disease can spread quickly, so an accurate diagnosis here is absolutely essential. The Kohen here is part doctor, part judge, and part jury. He steps forward to diagnose the affliction. What's so interesting to me is that there is no objective truth here. The condition is determined solely on the basis of the Kohen, that priest's proclamation. If he says it's not serious, then it's not. But if he declares your ailment is tzara'at, then your entire life turns upside down. Your clothing is rent. Your hair is shaved. You wear the garments of a mourner. You are sent into isolation, as Frankie described, lest that illness spread to infect the rest of the community. That gives a tremendous amount of power to the Kohen, maybe too much power. I imagine that the people of that time may have felt impotent in the face of a system that granted their leadership an irrefutable mandate to determine the very course of their lives. I imagine this may have been for them profoundly disempowering. And yet the Torah insists that atem tihiyu li mamlechet kohanim, that we, all of us, every single one of us, is a nation of priests. meaning perhaps that it's wrong to conclude that the people were powerless before this imposing leadership, but rather that it is up to every single one of them and one of us to step forward and make our choice and make our declaration. This past week, a new dark shadow was cast on what was already the saddest day of the year in Israel. For the past 20 years, broken-hearted Israelis and Palestinians have chosen to mark Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Memorial Day, in a joint ceremony put together by the Parents Circle, Bereaved Families Forum, and Combatants for Peace. These past several years, there has been a rising chorus of objection. Far-right hecklers who have tried to drown out the voices of the bereaved by shouting into bullhorns, blasting music, honking horns, anything to block out the anguished words of the speakers. This year, on Tuesday night, the ceremony in leafy Ra'anana, a suburb of Tel Aviv, was targeted by far-right kahanists. This is a homegrown mob of Jewish extremists. Police had to barricade the building and evacuate participants as protesters threw stones and spit at and assaulted participants in a Memorial Day ceremony. They launched fireworks at the building. My colleague, who is the rabbi of that synagogue, wrote the following: "We never imagined that an act of solidarity would turn into a night of fear, that the windows of our synagogue would shake under violent assault, not from strangers, but from fellow Jews, that our congregants trapped inside would need protection from large police forces fearing for their lives. The scenes from last night echo dark chapters in our history, when Jews were attacked in their houses of prayer, but this time the horror was compounded because the attackers were Jews themselves." Contrast that with the response from the local leader of the ruling Likud party in Ra'anana, who not only celebrated these attacks, but threatened future violence, announcing that this is only the opening salvo. Maybe you still think that this kind of extremism is rare in our Jewish community, that other religious traditions have extremists. For us, it's just a few bad apples. Or maybe you think that this breeds well in the Mediterranean sun, but couldn't take hold here in the diaspora. And yet, surely you also saw what happened in Brooklyn last weekend. Protesters gathered at 770, the Chabad headquarters, to decry the presence of Israel's far-right Minister of National Security, a person himself with multiple convictions for incitement to racism and support for a terrorist organization. A government minister who has bragged these past several months about thwarting a ceasefire and hostage return deal. I want to be very careful here. No one seems to know exactly what happened next, and I would not be at all surprised if we found out that some of those who gathered to protest shouted violent anti-Semitic chants and even engaged in acts of violence. We do not know. What we do know is that hundreds of religious Jewish boys and men poured into the streets and subjected protesters and neighbors to verbal and physical abuse that shocks the conscience, rape threats, death to Arabs, and more. I was heartened to see that the leadership of Chabad immediately condemned the crude language and violence of the young men. Such actions are entirely unacceptable and wholly antithetical to the Torah's values, they said. But they also claimed that it was only a small breakaway group of young people. I'm sorry, I don't accept that excuse when people tell me to stop talking about anti-Semitism on campus because it's only a small breakaway group of protesters who are shouting, "Go back to Poland," and posting about nefarious Jews who control the universities and the banks and the government. I wonder what it will take for our Jewish community to finally admit that extremism is far more widespread than only a few bad apples or a small breakaway group of radicals. I feel sometimes embarrassed to be Jewish, said one of my friends this week. And I understand this, but I do not accept it. That is ceding our thousands of years old tradition to these extremists. And that is ceding our agency and our choice. Yes, to be responsible Jews today, we have to connect the dots between Crown Heights and Ra'anana. We are paying the price today not only for Israel's government's ceaseless warmongering, but for the mainstreaming of extremists and their ideologies. There is an affliction, there is a moral rot that threatens to engulf not only the patient with the skin lesion, but the whole community. And just because the self-appointed Kohanim of our time, the leaders of the established Jewish community, fail to diagnose it as such, that does not mean that it is not here. I worry that we have fallen into the trap of ceding our agency, of believing that the outcome of the struggles of our time are predetermined by other people who have louder voices and bigger platforms. What power do I have to push back against these terrible tides within Israel, within America, within our Jewish community, within the left? But I don't buy it. Because between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies the power to choose. We are Mamlechet Kohanim. We are a nation of priests. Our agency is our most sacred inheritance. There is always a choice before us. What kind of Jews are we? What kind of Americans are we? What kind of human beings are we? Now, at that Yom HaZikaron ceremony, that Memorial Day ceremony that was disrupted by extremists who could not bear the notion of shared grief, a woman named Liat Atzili spoke. On October 7th, she was abducted by Hamas from her home in Kibbutz Nir Oz, and her husband, her partner of 30 years, Aviv, was murdered, and her whole world was shattered. In her words, the anchors of my life were uprooted. My home was invaded and destroyed. In captivity, she explained that through terror and uncertainty, not knowing if her loved ones were alive or dead, she realized that, again, in her words, even in this situation in which I had no control over anything, I still had the choice of what kind of person to be. It was this realization that gave Liat the strength, both within captivity and since she has been released, to choose to look into the face of the other, to dream of peace, and to help build a moral and just society. Liat's sentiment was echoed by nearly every speaker, Israeli and Palestinian. Musa Hetwa, a Palestinian who lost 28 relatives in Gaza in this war, said with determination, despite all of the pain, we have not lost the ability to dream. Even in the heart of destruction, life is reborn. The war has taken our loved ones, but not our will to live. We weep, but we do not lose our humanity. No matter how long the night is, it will end. And I refuse to let pain be the only legacy that we leave our children. Even through unimaginable loss, he is proclaiming that we must not give up, that there is a path to justice and peace. There is a path to a world in which both our peoples can live in dignity and safety. And I ask this question again and again and again. If these bereaved Israelis and Palestinians could make such a choice, how can we not? I am not embarrassed to be Jewish. I am proud to be Jewish. I am proud to carry the mantle of a people who for thousands of years has chosen life over death, of a people who, faced with millennia of exile and persecution, choose to greet one another every Shabbat with the words Shabbat Shalom. On this holy day, may we find peace. I'm proud to be part of a people who, facing what seems like a ceaseless torrent of anti-Semitic hatred and threats and violence, continues to choose love and allyship and partnership. Proud to be part of a people that teaches our children to see the image of God in one another, to honor our precious earth, not to take any blessing in this world for granted. I'm proud to be part of a people who, in a time of lies and distortions and betrayal, uplifts the value of emet, of truth-telling, even when it hurts. I'm proud to be part of a people who, in a world of celebrity and self-indulgence and instant gratification, gives the highest honors to those who excel in the slow, steady study of ancient sacred text. Proud to be part of a people who, for more than a century in this country, vote consistently against our own economic best interests, because that's what it means to be a responsible citizen in a social and political collective. I'm proud to be part of a people that has led movements and built organizations dedicated to realizing our shared dream of a more just and equitable world for the Jewish people and for all people, a people that does not give up, right, Irv, when things get hard. I am proud to be part of a people who, on the brink of extinction, revitalized the ancient dream of return and chose to root the state that they would return to in freedom, justice, and peace as envisaged by the prophets of Israel, promising to ensure in that state complete equality of social and political rights to all of its inhabitants. That was a choice. And I am proud to be part of a people who, when successive governments of that state have undermined those core values and undermined that dream, have taken to the streets in righteous protest, declaring that there is another way and we will build it. I'm proud to be part of a people that carries the muscle memory of the journey me'afela li'ora, from darkness to light, from enslavement to freedom, from degradation to dignity, a people who, in an unforgiving world, never gives up on the possibility of tshuva, of return, of healing, even after the hardest and most entrenched battles. A people that has chosen dissent and resistance in the face of pharaohs then and now. A people that has never, ever given up hope and keeps writing and laughing and creating and inventing, even when facing the blackened edge of the abyss. All of that is a choice. The fact that other Jews are making different choices in our time only makes me more committed to my own. I know that I'm not alone in this room in wanting some days to give up, to give in to the hopelessness, to throw up my hands in despair. We feel frozen. We feel stuck. But we must not believe that there's nothing that we can do. With every last breath, every one of us has a choice to make. In an address to her Harvard class reunion last year, Andrea said that even with stage 4 cancer, that even after experiencing and navigating profound loss, she realized that she still had that agency. She said that learning that she had the power to choose her response became her superpower. Choosing is essential to our vitality. Our very life force depends on it. So please, friends, please tell me that times are tough. Tell me that we have a narrowing landscape of possibilities before us. Tell me that we're in the 11th hour and it looks like the bad guys are winning. Tell me that you're scared. And tell me that our options are limited, but please do not tell me that there is nothing that we can do, because there's always a choice that we can make. And I will always choose love. And I will always choose the path to peace. And I will always choose to strive to see the humanity in every single image of God. And you know I will always choose hope. And you must too. Because between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose. And in that choice lies our freedom, and our growth. Shabbat Shalom.